Welcome to the Covered Bridges of New Hampshire podcast, where we discuss all things related to covered bridges in the Granite State. Here's your host, Kim Chandler.
Hello, Covered Bridge people, and welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking with the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance Executive Director Jennifer Goodman about historic preservation efforts in the state and their impact on saving covered bridges. Join us for a conversation about successful preservation efforts and how the Alliance celebrates this work. Here we go. In this episode, we'll learn about the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. The Alliance was born in 1985 as a response to concerns about rapid growth that was eroding the character of traditional New Hampshire communities and landscapes. The Alliance helps individuals and communities throughout the state achieve their preservation goals. Today we're talking with the Alliance's Executive Director, Jennifer Goodman. The Alliance's services, impact, and constituent base have increased dramatically since Jennifer became the director 2 decades ago. The organization's work with historic agricultural properties, conservation organizations, incentives, and preservation easements has been recognized both statewide and across the country. She has presented and published widely on community-based preservation planning and advocacy techniques and is the co-editor of the prize-winning Restoring Women's History Through Historic Preservation. She worked previously at the National Building Museum and for preservation organizations in Boston and Philadelphia, and served as vice chair of a National Alliance of Preservation Organizations. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. So what is the mission of the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance? Can you talk about the work that you all do?
Yeah, we're the statewide historic preservation organization, really aiming at helping save community landmarks around the state, helping property owners advance all kinds of preservation projects, from a save of an old church to a revitalization of a Main Street building, to trying to figure out how to steward an old family farm. How do we keep the character of New Hampshire, what people love about their communities, and also do that work to contribute to local economies? That's, it's an important part of historic preservation benefits, with great local labor and creating the communities where people want to live, work, and visit.
The Alliance has been part of many successful preservation efforts across the state, including covered bridges, which of course I have a fondness for. How did the group become involved with covered bridges?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a iconic landmark of New Hampshire, right? A beloved landmark. So I think we've tried to help hold up great examples to inspire others around the state. We've helped different local efforts where there was a question about whether a covered bridge could be saved or not. And we're always looking at sort of policy issues, kind of macro issues that shape or hurt sort of the landscape that we love. So I guess we've been involved in some extent on that level as well.
When you say policy issues, I know that some covered bridge projects have had oversight by another state agency or an inspection as part of that historic process. Do you advocate for that process, or how is your organization involved in that?
That's happening with our sister organization at the State Historic Preservation Office. So they're helping manage processes that are trying to limit adverse effects on historic resources. Section 106 is the federal law that often comes into play. So when there's federal money or licensing or action that's going to affect a historic resource like a bridge, that process kicks in with the appropriate federal agencies, and the Division of Historical Resources is there at the table as well.
Okay. And I know that the Alliance does annually, I believe, the 7 to Save list. Can you talk a little bit about that list and when it started and how a property gets on it?
Yeah. Our organization's over 30 years old and done a lot of different kind of projects and efforts over the years. I think it was mostly after Daniel Webster Farm in Franklin. We had nominated that to a national endangered list, and that listing had helped enormously in terms of turning the tide to save the home of Daniel Webster that's got this layered, wonderful history. we looked around and we saw other states having these kind of endangered or saved lists as well, really designed to draw attention to vulnerable resources and help give advocates, owners, those involved in the preservation effort just another tool to sort of use to promote their cause.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like being on that list is critical in some ways for some properties. Does it draw attention from from funding sources? Is that
Yeah, it definitely helps, and I think it's that listing is sort of as good as the advocates make it in a way, but it certainly caught the attention of funders. I think one of the first bridges we had on the list was the Whittier Bridge in Ossipee. That was sort of its future was hanging in the balance back in 2007. And we had been working with one of the lead advocates, Bob Gillette, in town, and he applied, and the town applied and was successful receiving that designation. And I think, again, that was one more tool to sort of help the momentum. And I know they secured a major grant from a great funding source we have in New Hampshire, the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, certainly after that. And there was positive momentum.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a story of tenacity and patience, I think, because lots of stops and starts. And here, where I can't do the math, but here we 15 years later, where finally another boost of federal money is helping to get that fabulous, iconic bridge named for the poet who summered nearby, restored and back where it should be in use.
Right. I mean, the bridge was closed in 1989 and was moved. Yeah, it was moved off of its abutments in 2006, and it wasn't until they were put on the 7 to Save list the following year they got a $100,000 grant to get that moving. So I would say, and I think Bob would say too, that was a huge piece of moving that project forward.
Yeah.
So.
Sometimes we do thematic listings, and I actually wanted to share with your listeners that we put metal truss bridges as a theme on the list. I think it was the following year because, certainly covered bridges are vulnerable for sure and deserving of preservation efforts. I think by the numbers, those metal truss bridges were doing even worse in terms of our loss of them through the year. So again, that was just another bridge-related connection to 7 to Save and gave a boost. Not out of the woods yet, but definitely gave a boost.
Great. And several covered bridge projects have been recognized with the Preservation Achievement Award, including Newport's covered bridge, the Corbin in 1994, Andover's Sillyville Bog Bridge in 2003, Haverhill Bath in 2009, Campton's Blair Bridge in 2015, Stark Bridge in 2016, and then this past summer, Bradford's Beament Bridge was recognized. What's the history of those awards? How does that process work?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of the flip side of the 7 to Save in a way, right? We want to be celebrating things when they're at the other end of their journey.
Right.
And we've got a successful preservation effort. And I think of historic preservation as a movement, multifaceted. It's not just, one kind of thing. So we love the awards program to reflect that. So it's transformational rehabilitations and saves. It's stewardship of a building or a place over time. It's community-wide, planning and promotion sort of ventures, educational programs for kids. We really try to cover the waterfront with that program. And we've loved celebrating those bridge projects for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They're all a little different, but yeah.
Right. What is the process? Do the towns apply for the award? Are they nominated?
Anybody can apply. An interested townsperson can, a bridge advocate can, the municipality also could. The bridges also the awards recognize the team. So in a case like the most recent award in Bradford, it was we were honoring the town itself. Select board was there when we made the award. The engineering team, the construction group, the funders, everybody who's part of the team to make these projects happen.
Well, and that I think that's important because what I found in researching, a lot of the reason why these covered bridges are still here is because of a team
Yeah.
of people who have come together, and I think that connecting all of these stakeholders has been key in ensuring
Yeah.
that these bridges stay. I mean, historic preservation is a relatively new thing. I know, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, buildings were just torn down and covered bridges were just torn down, and to make way for something modern. And it really has been in my lifetime that this has become a real focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're riding a good wave now of sort of understanding the embodied energy that's part of the wood that was cut for these bridges, the energy that was spent by craftspeople to put them together, part of our local identity, the place where people want to be and stay.
Hmm.
So that's all. That's a good wave to be on, I think.
Hmm.
And the awards, I think we're looking at multiple things, and again, different project by project, but really celebrating the preservation of some of these rare survivors, these, the last of this kind, the last of four of that kind. A lot of great municipal commitments, town commitments, city commitments to preserve these and spend the money that way.
Hmm.
And then the engineering design piece. So back to your team approach that you were talking about, that
Hmm.
how do we preserve as much historic fabric as possible, sort of meet preservation guidelines and standards, but also make them more useful for wider loads, higher loads,
Hmm.
separating pedestrians from vehicular access, things like that.
Right.
So lots of creativity and
Hmm.
good work.
And I see that in all of the projects, and one that's a little different that received an award was when Arnold Grayton rebuilt the Corbin
Yeah,
Bridge,
yeah.
that had been burned down. And that can you talk a little bit about that? Were you a part of the organization during that
That was
time?
before my time, but it is part of a little trend, isn't it? That aren't there two
Yeah.
or three other towns that have done that
Hmm.
as well?
Yes. Yes.
Suffering a big loss and really um, choosing that design to come back and that level of craftsmanship to be the replacement bridge. Um, it certainly says something about those communities.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, and it leads into my next question because Arnold Grayton was awarded with one of these awards in 2020 for his outstanding leadership to pre- preserving covered bridges and other buildings as well, not just covered bridges, which I
Yep,
think he's known for, but he does a lot more than
he
just
does.
covered bridges. Can you talk about Arnold's work and why the Alliance selected him to receive
Yeah,
this?
yeah. Um, I talked about trying to match awards to different elements of the movement, and certainly these leaders in the trades are, you know, one of our incredible assets that we have in New Hampshire for sure. And um, Arnold Grayton is at top of the pyramid, and so I think the award was reflecting on his sort of the scale and scope of what he's done. Over 100 community projects, I think, is the count. New, restored, and repaired bridges,
Mhm.
as well as you said, significant residential, commercial, and institutional landmarks. Um, that this work has really helped shape public understanding and public awareness of these places and the work
Mhm.
behind it. Um, and then I just think of, or the committee thought of, adjectives like courageous, ready to take on anything, creative, and that um, balancing act of preserving the old while creating a bridge that really works for new, or a building that really works for new, and just commitment over time, just
Mhm.
really unparalleled. So it was so exciting and wonderful to be able to honor him. And I love that the nomination for this one actually came from one of his very most recent clients. But then, as we told people of the award, I think there would have been hundreds of clients that would have
Yes.
done the nomination and um, celebrated his great work over time that continues. And I think people all around the world are talking about workforce shortages. And I think, talking about Arnold sort of reminds us of the concerns that we have in our community about the shortage of preservation trades craftsmen, and really, wanting to do what we can to make sure those traditions are passed on to the next generation, and we have enough people to do this work. Because I think, as you said, the trend and awareness keeps rising, so we're going to need the fine craftsmen, committed, courageous people to do this work going forward as well. Yeah,
exactly. So how can our listeners help support your work at the Alliance?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking that. We're a nonprofit membership organization. We don't have any federal or state money, so donations and membership and getting engaged in different ways is really important for us to continue to help save and revive things around the state, and point out endangered properties and celebrate great successes, as we've talked about during this time. Our website, nhpreservation.org, has lists of events and activities and ways people can be involved. So lots of different ways to connect and really invite and encourage people to.
Do you have any closing thoughts on the relationship between the Alliance and New Hampshire's covered bridges?
Yeah. I just think they're sort of front and center in whatever we do as emblems of that bridge, if I can use that, between sort of the old and new, right. Finding ways to do both. And I think I just keep seeing different ways that people come to our work and come to our organization because of this. Properties like covered bridges that sing out about tradition and craftsmanship and hard work and beauty, just really important ingredients in the communities that people want to spend time in, want to visit, part of what makes New Hampshire, or great old communities vibrant for the future.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you very much.
In May of 2020, the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance presented an award for outstanding leadership to Arnold Grayton. Because of the national pandemic, Arnold's presentation was done via video. The 4-minute video will be linked in the show notes, but please stay tuned for the audio version.
Arnold M. Grayton's work has helped shape the public's understanding and acceptance of the preservation of historic bridges and other structures in New Hampshire. He is considered one of the most influential timber frame craftsmen in the United States. Arnold's portfolio features nearly 100 new, restored, and repaired bridges, as well as significant residential, commercial, and institutional landmarks. According to architectural historian James Garvin and others, Mr. Grayton is the most experienced covered bridge specialist alive today. Arnold got his start with his dad, Milton Grayton. During the flood control programs of the 1950s, the Grayton's construction company was hired to remove covered bridges in a floodplain. Arnold remembers, "When asked to relocate one of these historic structures, my father and I often had to give the bridge a little additional support before the move could take place." Arnold and his father built their first covered bridge in Campton, New Hampshire, and Arnold has continued repairing, restoring, building, and innovating ever since, for almost 7 decades. Grayton is a problem solver and a careful steward, not just of bridges, but of old barns, museums, churches, and other historic landmarks as well. Even historic fire towers and huts for hikers in remote locations, and, recently, the Mayflower II, a replica of the ship that carried the Pilgrims to New England. Some of Arnold's favorite projects through the years are the 1971 construction of the 150-foot-long New England College covered bridge in Henniker, the first all-wood covered bridge built in the state using traditional methods since 1907. Guam Covered Bridge in Ashland, which was the last bridge he worked on with his dad. a replica of the Corbin Covered Bridge in Newport, a 158-year-old span destroyed by arsonists in May 1993. The state-owned 1889 Kentucky Covered Railroad Bridge, the oldest covered railroad bridge in the United States, and construction of a new covered bridge for exhibition at the Smithsonian Institution's 1999 Folklife Festival in Washington, D.C., a festival that was later represented in Hopkinton. Grayton is a superb craftsman in wood and is an expert rigger and building mover. He believes in and uses traditional timber framing and bridge building techniques. He prefers hand tools to power machinery, has pulled structures into place with oxen, and cinches together the framing with long wooden pegs called trunnels, which his team mills by hand. Grayton is loved and respected by clients. They admire his work ethic and the way he solves problems. Whether it's hauling materials and people to remote places like a trail on Tuckerman's Ravine, dealing with complicated load issues on a bridge, moving the historic brick cable house in Durham, or tackling a difficult shoring and leveling job during a great revival of the Eagle Block in Newport. He is a man of few words, but keen intelligence. Arnold's team of his wife Meg and stepson Tim Dansereau, along with Don Walker, has played a significant role in Arnold's success for many years. Arnold's son, J.R. Grayton, also works independently on preservation projects throughout the Granite State. New Hampshire is so fortunate to have Arnold Grayton as a link to the past and a modern-day pioneer for the future.
Covered Bridges of New Hampshire is created by me and recorded in Hancock, New Hampshire. The song Old New Hampshire was arranged and performed by Josh Black. The introduction is courtesy of Greg Kretschmar. This podcast is a companion to my book, Covered Bridges of New Hampshire. You can find out more about the book, the podcast, blog posts, upcoming events, and an interactive covered bridge map at coveredbridgesnh.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Covered Bridges of New Hampshire. Please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kim Chandler. Thanks for listening.